Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to our third workshop session on grateful living. In this session, we're going to go through another one of the Grateful Living series from the 8-part sermon series on grateful living that you can run in your home church or youth group or wherever you want to do it, to remind us and everybody about living gratefully. Remember, in the first workshop, we looked at all those excellent, amazing health benefits that come from living gratefully. And spiritual benefits as well, and relationship benefits. Let's jump in. I'll just share the screen here now, and we will be ready to go. Okay, grateful living. How can we be faithful stewards of, in this case, our time? Remember, this series is an 8-part series about time, talents, testimony. Hey, I won't tell it to you. Let the girls, Anna Beeden and Kemi Ogendi, let them sing it to you.
Time, talents, testimony, treasure temple territory. With my tribe, in truth we abide. Time, talents, testimony, treasure temple territory. With my tribe, in truth we abide. Gratefulness, it's how we wanna live. Gratefulness, so abundant and free. So abundant and free.
Isn't that beautiful? The ladies recorded that for me, and really they're just showing the talents that God has given them and using those talents for God's glory. They recorded that in a room with an iPhone. Amazing, just 2 a cappella voices. So thank you, ladies, for using your beautiful talents for God's glory. Today we're looking at time. How can we use the time that God has given us for his glory? How can we faithfully manage the time he's given us? Economic researcher and futurist Chris Martenson has an illustration that reinforces the fact that the actual end of Earth's history could be nearer than we think. Now, I don't know whether Chris Martenson is a Christian or not, but this is an illustration that he uses, and it's really, really powerful, especially when we look at it from a Seventh-day Adventist Christian perspective. He says, imagine that we are in Sydney's ANZ Stadium, and there's going to be a massive football game on, and we don't want to lose our seat, so we get there really, really early into this huge stadium, and we go right to the top of the stands. So we sit right in the highest seat up at the back of the stands, and we actually handcuff ourselves to the seat so that we don't miss the game. Okay, we're serious fans. So we handcuff ourselves to the seat before midday. At midday, we see a guy walk out into the middle of the football field, and he uses a magic eyedropper, and he places just 1 drop of water right in the middle of the football field, just 1 drop, but it's a magic drop of water. Because what happens is that every minute that water doubles in size. So after 1 minute, the 1 drop becomes 2 drops. And after another minute, the 2 drops becomes 4 drops. In another minute, the 4 drops becomes 8 drops. You can see the situation. Well, the question is, how long do we have before we need to get out of the stadium or we will drown? Okay, so you can see we've got this magic water in the middle of the football stadium. It's doubling every minute. How long do we have before we will actually be drowned right at the top back seat of the stadium? Well, by 12:44 p.m., so 44 minutes later, there would be just 1.5 meters of water in the bottom of the stadium covering the football field. So 93% of the stadium is still empty. It's still air. So no problem. There's only 1.5 meters of water on the field. How long do we have? How much more time do we have? Well, the startling reality is that if we don't get out of our handcuffs within the next 5 minutes, then we're going to drown. Wow. Interesting, isn't it? For 44 minutes, we've been watching and we think we've got all the time in the world. But then all of a sudden, it's over. Forever. Too late. And so it is that Martinson warns with our planet today. He says it's what we call hockey stick graphs, global trends that for centuries have appeared to be flatlined. The graph just goes along like this with slow incremental growth, but then suddenly there's an expansion of growth and the graph goes up like that, incredibly fast. And he says that's where we are in 2022. As we look around at the world, we see lots of these hockey stick graphs all coming together simultaneously. Sorry, I should have shown you some of these slides as we went. Only 1.5 metre of water by 1244. Remember, everything looks fine. We're sitting right up the back at the top of the stadium. That's no problem. But just 5 minutes later, it's full. We had to get out of our handcuffs in that 5 minutes or we would drown. And here you can see some examples of these hockey stick graphs. World population. This is going from about the year 300 AD through to today. And you can see that after, in the late 1900s, away it went. And we've just passed 8 billion people on this planet. Oil consumption by region, you can see it going up there. It hasn't actually come down at the end. It's just the shape of the graph. It's just continuing to go up. Global freshwater use from 1901, this is just through to 2014. So that's just in the last 100 years. So you can imagine if we saw that over 1,000 years, it would be another hockey stick graph. Australia's growing government debt, and this might be the same in whatever nation you're watching from as well. The debt is just going up so fast. What about consumer debt? Families are getting into more and more debt, faster and faster and faster. So we see these graphs. It's a 5-minute difference, but it's on an exponential curve. And so things are happening fast. In all different aspects of society, we're seeing problems, we're seeing challenges that need to be addressed. Ellen White said it this way in the book Testimonies, Volume 9, page 11. She says, great changes are soon to take place in our world, and the final movements will be rapid ones. The final movements will be rapid ones. So you can see that if you put it on a graph, she says, great changes are going to happen in our world, and the final movements will be rapid ones. Time. In light of this, how can we faithfully manage our time? Here in Christ's Object Lessons, page 342, we read that our time belongs to God. Every moment is his, and we are under the most solemn obligation to improve it to his glory. Of no talent he has given will he require a more strict account than of our time. Sobering words. We need to care for our time. It's a gift from God, and we need to manage it wisely. So how might we best manage the time that God has entrusted to us? Well, as we saw last time, there is a great controversy going on. In the last workshop, we looked at the great controversy around our territory, the environment. Now we're looking at the great time controversy. God's blueprint says that every moment is a precious gift, and I will be most blessed if I use it for his glory. Satan's counterfeit, he says, I've got all the time in the world. Time is mine, and I can use it how I want. That's what Satan wants us to think. God's blueprint, God created the world in 6 literal 24-hour days and rested on the 7th day. Satan says, the earth evolved over millions of years, and it will just keep going. You can see the deceptions. They're complete opposites, aren't they, in belief? God's blueprint says that busyness can take us away from God. But Satan said busyness is the best way to get ahead. How do we balance that? God says Earth's time will soon be finished. And Satan says, mankind will find a way to save the planet from total destruction. Don't worry about it. God's blueprint? Today is the day of salvation, and I mustn't delay my commitment to God. But Satan says, there's no rush. Make your eternal choices tomorrow. So we can see there's this incredible controversy going on between God and Satan over how we use the time that God has given us. Revelation 12:12 says that the devil is filled with fury because he knows that his time is short. That's an interesting insight, isn't it? When Satan tells us, oh, you've got all the time in the world and don't worry about your salvation. They can do that another day. You can waste time, no worries. The Bible actually tells us that Satan knows that his time is short and he's concerned about that. Ephesians 5:15-17 says, see then that you walk circumspectly or cautiously, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. And in Daniel 12:3, those who are wise, and this is talking about the last days of Earth's history, God's people in the last days, the days that we're living in now, it says that those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. Interesting, the word wise coming up there in both of those. The wise will redeem the time, and God's people in the last days will be wise. What will one of the ways that they show that? Because they will manage their time wisely. In Christ's Object Lessons, talking about time management, we read, we are admonished to redeem time, but time squandered or wasted can never be recovered, can never get it back. We cannot call back even one moment. The only way in which we can redeem our time is by making the most of that which remains, by being co-workers with God in his great plan of redemption. So let's have a couple of tips about time management. Number one, find out what role you can play in God's mission. What role can you play in God's mission? 1 Corinthians 12 talks about some of the talents and gifts that God gives us for his mission. And God has appointed these in the church. First, apostles. Second, prophets. Third, teachers. Then miracles. Then gifts of healings, helps, administrations, varieties of tongues. And in other places in the New Testament, we read that God also gives people the ability to have creative communications, generous giving, leadership skills, evangelism, and pastoral ministry. These are all ways that we can use our time faithfully, that we can manage the time that God gives us for his glory. Tip number two, learn how to number your days. You know, when I was young, when my family became Christians, my dad had obviously come across in his Bible Psalm 90:12, and it says, teach us to number our days that we might gain a heart of wisdom. There it is again, wisdom. Time and wisdom together. The wise manage their time well. And my dad would come to me whenever he thought I was wasting time. He'd say, Julian, Psalm 90:12, number your days, be wise. And that's my encouragement to you as well. Schedule your priorities instead of prioritizing your schedule. Schedule your priorities instead of prioritizing your schedule. What that's really saying is prioritize how you use your time rather than just letting the mountain of commitments or the avalanche of commitments come down and swamp you. Here we can see some of the time priorities that we need to make time for. Number one, devotions, time with God. Number two, family. Got to spend time with our families. You know, somebody once said that children spell the word time L-O-V-E. Isn't that interesting? Love. That's how children understand time. And we give them time and they feel loved. So family, health. Make sure you prioritize your health. And, you know, this can be one of the hardest things to do for a busy person because there seem to be so many other pressures. And we might struggle to eat well when there's fast food and we're busy. And so fast food is good for busy people. No, it's actually deadly for all people. Every meal either heals or harms. We've got to remember that. And maybe we're too busy to exercise. But, you know, the interesting thing is the science shows us that if we exercise every day, even if we spend half an hour exercising, we will be more efficient for the rest of the day and we will actually get more done than if we don't exercise at all and use that whole time for work. So we've got to be wise with the priorities of our health. Sabbath. Take that time off for God. That's a whole sermon in itself, but there are so many blessings in life when we take time to be with God on the Sabbath, when we respect his day and keep it holy as he has invited us to do. It's the most beautiful day. Prioritizing service and mission, caring for others, loving others, reflecting God's character to others. So important as we choose what to do with the time that God has given us. And of course, useful work. You know, Jesus spent many, many years in a carpenter's shop, working with timber, working with his hands, doing high quality work for the people of Nazareth and around about. It's a very, very important part of using time for God's glory by doing useful work. In Child Guidance, page 124, we read, as far as possible, it is well to consider what is to be accomplished through the day. Make a memorandum of the different duties that await your attention and set apart a certain time for the doing of each duty. So you can see she's talking about scheduling here, about time management. Give yourself a number of minutes to do the work and do not stop to read papers and books or distractions on your screen that take your eye, but say to yourself, no, I have just so many minutes in which to do my work and I must accomplish my task in the given time. You know, it's tricky these days. Some of us do a lot of work on computers or phones or whatever device it might be. And there's so many interruptions and distractions. But let's focus, as it says here. Let's focus on the job, get it done, and then move on to the next one. All for God's glory. How's this for a powerful quote? Our instances are filled with eternal consequences. Our smallest pieces of time can have an eternal consequence. Interesting. We can make a small decision that has long consequences. Recently, back about 3.5 weeks ago, I was down at the local skate bowl. It's a concrete bowl in the ground, and I was on a BMX bike and I was riding around in the bowl and having a great time and really enjoying myself, but I forgot that the side of my wheels on the bike, the side of the tires, was wet. And as I went up one of the walls, the bike slipped out from underneath me and I came crashing down in an instant. Well, I don't think it'll have eternal consequences, but I tell you what, 3.5 weeks later, I'm still struggling to walk properly because I've got a really sore knee and a foot that is pretty badly hurt. So there it was, something that I decided to do in an instant, but it had long consequences. And some of those instant decisions can have eternal consequences as well. So here's the question. Will what I do today make a difference in eternity? That's an important question. That's my prayer every morning. Lord, orchestrate my day, orchestrate my time, manage my time, my appointments, my phone calls, my emails, everything that I do to make a difference in eternity. I don't want to waste a day. I don't want to waste a moment. I just want to do what you would have me do for eternity. Jesus and time management. We've already talked about it. How Jesus, his time was entirely consecrated to God and to his work. Now, it's very obvious in his ministry years because we have a record of that, where he just went from ministry appointment to ministry appointment that God was leading him to and working through in his life. But, you know, even when he was in the carpenter's shop in Nazareth, he was still doing God's will. He was still ministering to people with the time and talents that God had given him. His time was dedicated to those who need him. Good example for us as well. You know, God has a time miracle too. He says that if we set aside quality time for him every day, he will make us more efficient with the rest of our time so that we will still accomplish the same amount or more. That's a miracle, but God promises it. As we come towards the end, I just want to read you some lyrics from a song by a guy called Josh Wilson. It's called Dream Small. You know, the world tells us dream big, be busy. And there's a place for that as well. Even in ministry, you know, we dream big. We want to save lots of souls. We dream big. But there's a place for dreaming small as well. Look at this. It's a mother singing songs about the Lord. It's a daddy spending family time that the world says he can't afford. These simple moments change the world. It's a pastor at a tiny little church, 40 years of loving on the broken and the hurt. These simple moments change the world. Dream small, Don't buy the lie that you've got to do it all. Just let Jesus use you where you are, one day at a time. Live well, loving God and others as yourself. Find little ways where only you can help. With his great love, a tiny rock can make a giant fall. So dream small. It's visiting the it's visiting the widow down the street, or dancing on a Friday with your friend with special needs. These simple moments change the world. Of course, there's nothing wrong with bigger dreams. Just don't miss the minutes on your way to bigger things, because these simple moments change the world. Dream small. Don't buy the lie you've got to do it all. Just let Jesus use you where you are, one day at a time. Live well, loving God and others as yourself. Find little ways where only you can help. With his great love, a tiny rock can make a giant fall. Dream small. It's beautiful, isn't it? About the importance of the minutes, the moments, the instances, the opportunities that God gives us to change the world through little decisions, little acts of kindness, little acts of love, little acts of faithful time management for God's glory. So how can we be faithful with time? A faithful steward does what their master would do if he were present. What would Jesus do in this moment, in the moments that fill your days? Remember, grateful living leads to cheerful giving. When we are grateful for the time that God has given us, then we will give that time for God, for his glory. All right, well, that's the end of this next session. I just want to leave you with a couple of questions now for you to discuss in your small groups or wherever you are there. Number one, why should Adventists be the best time managers on the planet? Why should Adventists be the best time managers on the planet? And number two, how can I be a more faithful steward of time? Okay, that's them. I'm going to leave you with it now, and I look forward to seeing you in the fourth and final workshop on grateful living. Thanks, guys.